My name is Hannah Whitfield, and I'm 30 years old. The night my mother finally looked at me like I was someone worth knowing, we were sitting around a table covered in green bean casserole and store-bought rolls, and one sentence out of my mouth stopped every fork in midair. Before I get into it, if you're new here, hit subscribe and smash that share button. This is Hidden Karma Stories, and trust me, this one earns its name. For almost 11 years, my mother treated me like a houseplant she forgot to water. No birthday texts unless she needed a favor first. No questions about my life unless her laptop froze or her printer wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi. No pride, no curiosity, just space I filled because I happened to be born into the family. Then at that dinner, while everyone reached for the cranberry sauce and acted like nothing was wrong, she gave me that same tired half-smile she'd worn my whole life and asked, "You still doing those little freelance computer things?" I looked at her, then at my brother, then at my father, who suddenly found his potatoes very interesting. And something in me went still and quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tear up. I set my fork down gently and said, "Not anymore." I turned down a $28 million buyout offer for my company last week. My brother's hand froze around his glass of sweet tea. My father stopped chewing entirely, and my mother's expression cracked open so fast it would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. The same woman who skipped my graduations, forgot my birthdays, and treated my entire existence like background noise, slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "Wait, what did you just say?" And right then, I understood something I'd never let myself admit before. She hadn't forgotten how to see me. She'd just been waiting until I became valuable enough to bother. Before I tell you what happened after that, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been invisible to someone, only to watch them suddenly remember your name the second you became successful? I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a house where love existed, but it definitely had a favorite address. And that address was wherever my older brother, Connor Whitfield, happened to be standing. By the time I was old enough to notice the pattern, he already had the bigger room, the louder birthday parties, private pitching lessons, brand new cleats every season, and his school photos lining the hallway like a campaign for mayor. My mother, Denise Whitfield, talked about him like he'd arrived on Earth with a destiny attached. I came along 7 years later, quieter, smaller, always buried in a library book or taking apart an old radio on the kitchen floor, and she treated me less like a daughter and more like an obligation she'd agreed to fulfill. She didn't hate me. Honestly, that might have hurt less. She fed me. She bought my school supplies. She signed whatever forms I put in front of her. But she never once looked at me like she expected anything from me. Connor was going to be somebody important. I was just going to turn out fine, whatever that meant. When Connor made the varsity baseball team as a freshman, the whole family drove out for steak dinner. When I won the regional science fair in 8th grade for building a working water filtration system out of charcoal and sand, Denise said, "That's nice, sweetheart," then asked if I'd seen where Connor left his batting gloves. I learned fast that if I wanted to feel proud of myself, I had to generate that feeling internally, because nobody was going to hand it to me. If I wanted my birthday remembered, I wrote it on the kitchen calendar myself, in marker, underlined. The year I turned 14, she forgot anyway because Connor had a youth football showcase that weekend. She came home that evening with a stack of business cards from Scouts, kissed the top of my head, and asked why I looked so upset. I pointed silently at the calendar. She blinked, laughed it off, and said, "Oh, Hannah, we'll do cake Sunday." We never did cake that Sunday. Or any Sunday after. My father, Gary Whitfield, wasn't unkind, but he avoided conflict the way some people avoid spicy food completely, on principle. He worked long shifts managing logistics for a regional shipping company, came home exhausted, and let Denise run the household emotionally. If I brought home a perfect report card, he'd glance up and say, "Good job, kiddo," then go back to the TV. If Connor came home complaining about an unfair coach or a teacher who had it out for him, suddenly, we were having a full family strategy session about how to fix it. By high school, Connor had become the family's whole personality. Denise called him her future entrepreneur, even though he had way more confidence than follow-through. He liked flashy watches he couldn't afford yet and talking loudly about opportunities at the dinner table. She called that vision. Meanwhile, When I stayed up late teaching myself to code from free online tutorials, she said I was isolating myself too much. When I fixed our elderly neighbor's laptop and earned $25 for it, she told me not to get distracted from real life. Real life, in our house, meant whatever made Connor look good. The strange part is, I never spent those years plotting some kind of payback. I spent them trying to be noticed. I cleaned the house without being asked. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I tutored kids 2 grades below me for extra cash. I joined the robotics club and stayed after school until the janitor kicked us out. Every small win felt like knocking softly on a door that had been locked from the other side for years. When I got accepted into the University of Oklahoma with a partial academic scholarship, Denise didn't cry, didn't celebrate, didn't tell a single relative. She just looked at the acceptance letter and asked if Norman was close enough for me to come home and help Connor with his website on weekends. That was the moment something inside me quietly shifted. I stopped knocking on that door. I started building my own. The 11 years she barely noticed me didn't start with some explosive argument. They started the week I moved into a dorm room with 2 suitcases and a second-hand desk lamp. Denise didn't call to ask if I was nervous or homesick. She texted once 3 weeks in. "Connor needs help with his real estate page this weekend. Can you do it?" I stared at that message for a long time before typing back, "I have work and an exam." She replied with a single word, "Typical." That was really the beginning. Not silence. Silence would have at least been honest. This was worse. She only remembered I existed when she needed something from me. For the next decade, I became something like a ghost who happened to know how to code. And ghosts, as it turns out, can build entire empires without anyone hearing a single hammer swing. College didn't feel like freedom right away. It felt like a debt I was constantly trying to outrun. My scholarship covered tuition, but nothing else came free, so I worked every job I could find. I pulled early shifts at a coffee cart near campus, restocked shelves at an office supply store after classes, and on the side, I started building cheap websites for local contractors, roofers, plumbers, landscapers, water damage crews, around Norman and the edges of Oklahoma City. That office supply store changed everything for me. Contractors would come in with manila folders stuffed full of photos, flooded basements, storm-damaged roofs, fire-scorched kitchens, along with handwritten estimates and insurance paperwork that looked like it had been through a tornado itself, which in Oklahoma, it sometimes literally had. These weren't tech-savvy people. They were exhausted, hardworking folks trying to help families rebuild after disasters nobody outside the state ever heard about. I watched them lose entire afternoons because one photo went missing, one claim number got transposed, or one insurance adjuster never received the right form. They were good people drowning in bad systems. And messy systems made sense to me, because I'd spent my whole life being filed in the wrong place by people who never built space for me to be seen properly. One evening, a contractor named Marcus Bell came in 10 minutes before closing with photos from a roof collapse after a hailstorm. His client was an elderly widow. The adjuster wanted more documentation, and his assistant had accidentally deleted half the image folder. I stayed late, recovered what I could, organized everything by address and claim date, and built him a simple tracking spreadsheet. He looked at the screen like I'd performed a magic trick. "What do I owe you?" he asked. I said $40, because I was 19 and had absolutely no concept of what my time was worth. He handed me $80 and told 2 other contractors about me by the end of that week. That was the very first seed of what would eventually become RestorePath AI. Back then, it was just me, a laptop with a cracked corner, and a growing suspicion that this problem was way bigger than anyone realized. I started asking questions nobody else seemed to be asking. Why were small restoration companies still tracking million-dollar insurance claims on paper and group texts? Why were field photos getting lost in someone's personal phone storage? Why was the homeowner, the actual person whose life had been turned upside down, always the last to find out what was happening with their own claim? The more I dug into it, the more obsessed I became. I skipped parties to interview contractors about their workflows. I spent Friday nights in the library teaching myself database architecture and basic machine learning so I could build a tool that could automatically sort damaged photos and flag missing paperwork. My roommate thought I'd lost my mind. My professors thought I was unusually driven. Denise thought I was avoiding my family. When I tried to explain to her that I'd found a real, legitimate business problem worth solving, she cut me off before I finished my sentence. "Connor's getting his real estate license," she said. "He might need you to clean up his online image. You're good with computers, maybe help him look more professional." I sat on my dorm bed, phone against my ear, listening to her talk about my brother like he was a hedge fund she'd already invested in. I had 4 paying contractor clients by then. I wanted to tell her. Instead, I said I had a test to study for and hung up. That night I worked until almost 4 in the morning. I built a dashboard where contractors could upload property photos, tag which room they belonged to, assign crew members, track the status of each claim, and generate clean reports for insurance adjusters. It was clunky and ugly, but it worked. Marcus tested it first. Then a water damage company in Edmond signed on. Then a roofing crew in Broken Arrow. Then a fire restoration team out of Tulsa. I undercharged everyone, answered every support email myself at midnight, and patched bugs between final exams. But for the first time in my life, something I'd made wasn't begging anyone to notice it. It was simply useful. People needed it. People paid for it without me having to ask twice. By senior year, I had 14 paying clients and a notebook full of half-formed ideas. I called it Restore Path because it built a path between the people doing the actual repair work, the families waiting in limbo, and the insurance companies demanding proof of everything. Later, once we added automation and predictive document scanning, it became RestorePath AI. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma with honors on a blazing hot afternoon in May. Denise didn't come. She said Connor had an open house that might lead to a serious connection. Gary texted me 4 words. "Proud of you, kid." I read them standing outside the arena while other families took photos with bouquets of flowers. I didn't cry. That night, still in my graduation dress, I opened my laptop and helped a client fix a broken claim report. That was how I celebrated. I worked, and for the first time, working felt less like screaming into a void and more like quietly building a door that nobody else held the key to. After graduation, Denise expected me to land something stable. She texted me listings for receptionist jobs and entry-level help desk positions, with little notes attached like, "This seems realistic," or "Benefits matter more than chasing dreams, Hannah." I almost laughed out loud at the word realistic. In our family, realistic had always just meant smaller dreams, smaller needs, smaller seat at the table. But by then, RestorePath AI was already bringing in more monthly revenue than any of those entry-level jobs would have paid me in a year. It wasn't glamorous. I rented a desk in a shared coworking space in Oklahoma City where the heating unit screamed every time it kicked on, and someone was perpetually microwaving leftover fish. I hired a part-time developer I found through a university alumni group and a customer support hire who used to work dispatch for a restoration company herself. 3 of us, 2 folding tables, 1 dry erase board, and a product that kept improving because our clients told us exactly where it hurt. We added automatic photo sorting, deadline alerts, material tracking, digital signature capability, and automated client updates that cut down on angry phone calls dramatically. Small companies trusted us because we never talked down to them. A roofer in Edmond didn't need some bloated corporate platform. He needed to know which claim was stalled, which crew was free Tuesday, and whether Mrs. Albright's kitchen cabinets had finally been approved. At 25, we had 39 paying companies on the platform. At 26, we crossed $500,000 in annual recurring revenue. I remember staring at that number on a spreadsheet and the whole room going quiet around me. I wasn't rich. Most of it went straight back into payroll, servers, legal fees, and product development. But the company was real now. It had weight to it. And some small, stubborn part of me still wanted to put proof on the table in front of my family, not for applause, but just to be seen. So I tried one more time. I called Denise on a Sunday afternoon. She picked up while driving, distracted, Connor's voice audible in the background. "RestorePath hit a big milestone this month," I said. "That's great, honey," she answered, then covered the phone and asked Connor if he'd called the mortgage broker back yet. When she returned, she said, "Actually, could you fix up Connor's real estate website? It looks kind of cheap." I closed my eyes and told her I could recommend someone else for that. She laughed. Recommend someone? Hannah, it's family. Don't be stingy with your little computer hobby. Little computer hobby. I wrote those exact words on a sticky note and stuck it to my monitor. Not because I believed them, but because I wanted to remember exactly how small a box she kept trying to fold me into. By 27, we signed a multi-state restoration group spanning Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas. By 28, we had 19 employees and just over $2.5 million in annual recurring revenue. We moved into a real office with glass-walled conference rooms, terrible parking, and a break room that genuinely made me emotional the first time I walked in and saw my own employees laughing over coffee. I paid people fairly because I knew exactly what it felt like to have your work taken for granted. Meanwhile, Connor's real estate career looked a lot shinier from the outside than it actually was underneath. He posted photos in tailored suits, leaned against cars he didn't own, used phrases like high-level deal flow, but he was quietly borrowing money from our parents and falling behind on credit card payments. Denise excused every single failure. The market was tough. Clients were difficult. His broker didn't appreciate his vision. He just needed one big break, always just one more. When I worked 18-hour days, I was obsessive. When he dropped the ball completely, he was misunderstood. That double standard used to make me furious. Eventually, it just made me sad because I realized she wasn't only failing me, she was quietly ruining him too. She'd raised a man who genuinely believed love meant rescue, and that rescue meant he'd never actually have to grow up. The first real article about RestorePath AI ran in an Oklahoma City business journal when I was 29. It called me an emerging founder in restoration technology and talked about our growth, our retention numbers, and how we used automation to cut claim processing time nearly in half. Gary saw it. I know because he liked the LinkedIn post at 6:40 in the morning before he'd even left for work. Denise never mentioned it at all. 3 weeks later, she called to ask if my company could sponsor one of Connor's real estate networking mixers. Not attend, not speak, sponsor. She said it would be great exposure for me. I asked if she'd actually read the article. She paused, then said, I skimmed it. Very nice. Anyway, Connor really needs that room to look impressive. That was the last time I tried to explain my success to her before that Thanksgiving. After that, I stopped sending updates. I stopped sharing links. What Denise didn't know was that bigger companies had already started calling private equity firms, insurance technology groups, construction software investors. I took the meetings quietly, and every single time someone slid a number across the table, I thought about that sticky note, little computer hobby. The box kept shrinking. I kept getting too big for it. The $28 million offer landed on a Tuesday morning in October, wrapped in polished legal language, and delivered by people who smiled like they were handing me a winning lottery ticket. The company was based out of Dallas, a large insurance tech conglomerate looking to expand aggressively into restoration software. Their executives praised our retention rates and used all the words founders are supposedly dying to hear. Strategic acquisition, accelerated scale, generational outcome. I sat across the conference table with my CFO and closest friend, Priya Anand, while they walked us through it. $28 million for a full acquisition, a retention package, a transition period, a press release, a future where RestorePath could supposedly reach the national market faster than ever. Then came the part they were hopping I wouldn't push back on. They wanted to shut down the Oklahoma City office within 18 months, fold our product entirely into their existing platform, lay off close to half our current staff, and quietly retire the RestorePath name altogether. I sat there holding the printed offer, letting myself feel the actual weight of that number. $28 million, enough to change my life completely, enough to change my parents' lives if I wanted it to, enough to finally buy silence from every single person who'd ever called my work cute or unrealistic, enough to become the kind of daughter Denise would suddenly want to brag about at church. But while they kept talking, I kept thinking about my actual team. The support rep who'd left a genuinely toxic workplace to come work for me. The developer expecting his first kid in the spring. The contractors across 3 states who trusted us because we actually picked up the phone when they called. I hadn't spent a decade building this company just to watch it get carved up and sold for parts. So I said no, not dramatically, not impulsively. I told them we were open to a partnership or an investment structure that protected our team and our mission, but not this deal, not like this. The room cooled noticeably. One executive said, "Hannah, offers like this don't come around twice." I told him, "Neither do companies like mine." Priya gripped her pen so tightly I genuinely worried it might snap in half. After they left, she laughed under her breath. "Your mother would absolutely lose it if she knew what you just turned down." I told her my mother would have to actually know what I do first. We planned to keep the offer quiet, but business news has a way of traveling once the number gets big enough. A regional article ran 6 days before Thanksgiving with a headline that genuinely made my stomach drop. "Local founder turns down $28 million buyout." My phone exploded with messages, clients, investors, old classmates, people I hadn't spoken to since high school graduation. Gary texted, "Is this real?" Before I could even respond, Denise called. Not texted, called. That alone told me she'd seen the dollar figure. Her voice came out syrupy sweet. "Hannah, sweetheart, are you coming home for Thanksgiving this year?" I hadn't gone home for Thanksgiving in nearly 3 years. The last time, I sat through dinner listening to Denise praise Connor for finally getting his real estate license while she asked me, completely seriously, whether coding was still something people hired for. I should have said no again. Priya told me to say no, but curiosity is a dangerous thing when it's tangled up with old wounds. I wanted to know which version of my mother would open that front door, the one who'd ignored me for over a decade, or the one who'd just discovered her daughter came attached to a dollar sign. So I drove to Tulsa on Thanksgiving morning with no jewelry, no fancy bag, no speech prepared. The house looked exactly the same, beige siding, a wreath on the door that was a little crooked, Connor's framed real estate headshot still sitting on the entryway table like a campaign poster nobody asked for. Denise hugged me a beat too long and said, "You look successful." Not beautiful, not healthy, successful. Gary hugged me quietly, the way he always did. Connor gave me a half smile and said, "Heard you've been busy." His fiancée, Brooke Sanders, smiled politely, clearly trying to figure out exactly what kind of family she was marrying into. Dinner started with turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and football murmuring low from the living room TV. Denise asked Connor about some new property lead, praised his hustle, and told Brooke he'd always been destined for something big. He mentioned a commission check he was expecting soon, not received, just expected, and Denise clapped like he'd just closed the deal of the decade. I just kept eating. I genuinely hadn't planned on saying anything at all. Then she turned to me with that same old smile, the one dipped in pity and quiet control, and said, "Hannah, you still doing those little freelance computer things? Connor might need someone like you once his business really takes off." The table went so quiet I could hear ice shifting in my glass. 11 years of missed calls, forgotten birthdays, unpaid favors, and quiet little dismissals all rose up behind my teeth at once. But when I finally spoke, my voice came out completely calm. "Not anymore," I said. "I turned down a $28 million buyout offer for my company last week." Connor's hand stopped halfway to his glass. Brooke whispered, "Oh my God." Gary set his fork down and stared at the tablecloth. Denise blinked once, then twice, then slammed her palm flat on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Wait, what?" she shouted. I looked at her face, suddenly hungry, suddenly awake, finally turned in my direction. And the strange part was, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt confirmed. She'd heard me just fine the whole time. She'd simply never decided my life was worth listening to before now. The first thing Denise did after hearing that number wasn't apologize. That told me everything I needed to know. She didn't say, "I'm sorry I never asked about your life." She leaned forward instead, eyes suddenly sharp, and said, $28 million. Like the number itself was a long-lost relative who deserved a seat at the table more than I ever had. Connor recovered first, laughing that short, brittle laugh men use when their egos bleeding out quietly. "Come on, Hannah," he said. "You mean like investors valued the company at that or something?" I looked right at him. "No, a signed buyout offer, full acquisition. I turned it down." Brooke stared at him, then at me, visibly doing the math, recalculating every story she'd been told about this family. Gary finally looked up. "You own the company." he asked quietly. I founded it, I said. Built it from scratch in college. We have clients across 3 states. We help restoration companies process insurance claims faster after disasters. He closed his eyes, and I knew exactly what he was thinking about every time I'd tried to tell him something and he'd chosen peace over actually paying attention. Denise's smile came back, but it wasn't warm anymore. It was fast and nervous, the kind people use when they're scrambling to rewrite history in real time. Well, she said, I always knew you were the smart one. I laughed once quietly. No, Mom, you knew I was useful. There's a difference. Her face hardened instantly. That's a cruel thing to say on Thanksgiving. Cruel, I said, is only calling your daughter when your son needs free tech support. Cruel is forgetting her birthday but remembering her Wi-Fi password skills. Cruel is asking him about leads while she's trying to tell you she built an actual company. Connor pushed his chair back. Okay, this is getting dramatic. I turned to him. You're right. Let's stay practical then. I'm not hearing you. I'm not sponsoring your events. I'm not paying off your debts. My company isn't a family emergency fund. His face went red. I hadn't brought up the debts by accident. Denise had let it slip in a voicemail weeks earlier that he was under pressure, and that family should help family. She went pale, realizing I'd understood exactly what that meant. Dinner ended without me raising my voice once. That mattered to me. Denise wanted a scene because a scene would let her call me unstable later to relatives. I gave her facts instead. Facts are a lot harder to spin. I told them the company was real, the offer was real, and the reason none of them knew about it was simple. Nobody had ever asked a real question and actually waited around for the answer. Then I stood up, thanked Gary for cooking the turkey, and left before dessert was even served. The next morning, Denise called me 5 times before 9 a.m. I picked up on the 6th, mostly out of curiosity about which version of her I'd get. She chose wounded mother. I don't understand why you embarrassed me in my own house. I told her I'd simply told the truth in her own house. She cried a little, but even her crying felt strategic. She said she'd done her best. She said mothers make mistakes. Then, after nearly 10 minutes of circling the word sorry without ever actually landing on it, she said, Connor's in a really hard spot, Hannah. Someone with your resources could change his whole life. There it was, not remorse, access. I told her no. She went quiet, then said, after everything this family gave you? I almost smiled. What exactly did you give me? I asked. Not food, not shelter, not the bare legal minimum. What did you give me that you didn't give him 10 times louder? She had no answer for that. Over the following week, she tried every angle. She texted me articles about forgiveness. She sent old baby photos like proof that holding me once erased a decade of not seeing me. She told relatives I'd become arrogant. She told Gary I was punishing her for being proud of her son. She told Connor that money had changed me, but money hadn't changed me. Money had just taken away their last excuse for overlooking me. The real shift happened at a family brunch 2 weeks later, though I never planned it. My aunt, Carol Whitfield, asked Denise point-blank in front of everyone if it was true that I'd built an actual tech company from nothing. Denise opened her mouth in that performance voice and said, "We always encouraged Hannah to follow her interests." Before I could respond, Gary set down his coffee mug. "No, we didn't," he said. The whole table froze. He looked at me, then at the rest of them. "She did that herself. We didn't pay attention the way we should have. We poured everything into Connor. We just assumed Hannah was fine on her own. That wasn't encouragement. That was neglect with better manners." Denise looked like he'd slapped her across the face. Connor looked furious, but not at me. At her. For the first time, someone had actually named the deal he'd benefited from his entire life. And suddenly it didn't look like love anymore. It looked like damage. He stood up and said, "You made me believe I was special even when I was failing. You kept catching me, and now I genuinely don't know how to stand on my own without looking for someone to catch me again." Denise started crying for real then, not, I think, because she'd hurt me, but because the story she'd told herself for 30 years was finally collapsing in front of an audience. She'd been the devoted mother, the one who built a successful son, the one who knew exactly which child deserved the investment. Now everyone could see what that investment had actually produced: a dependent son, a distant daughter, and a husband who could no longer shield her from the truth. I didn't enjoy watching her unravel. The satisfying part wasn't her pain. It was that I no longer had to carry her version of the story for her. Later, she followed me out to the driveway and grabbed my wrist. "Please, Hannah, don't shut me out." I looked down at her hand until she let go. "I'm not shutting you out," I told her. "I'm locking the door you only ever knock on when you need something. If you want a real relationship with me, it won't include my money, my company, or bailing out Connor. It'll include accountability, patience, and a long stretch of you actually listening." She cried harder. I got in my car anyway. For the first time, driving away from that house didn't feel like being unwanted. It felt like finally choosing myself before they could put a price on me again. 3 months after that Thanksgiving, RestorePath AI signed the biggest partnership in our company's history. Not with the Dallas firm that wanted to gut us, but with a national network of independent restoration contractors who wanted to stay locally rooted while using better technology. We opened a second office in Denver, expanded our support team, and launched a program specifically for small contractors handling disaster recovery in underserved rural communities. I also started a scholarship fund at the University of Oklahoma for young women studying information systems, construction technology, and applied AI. I called it the Scene Futures Fund. The name made Priya tear up the first time I said it out loud. I didn't build it to look generous. I built it because I knew exactly how many brilliant kids were sitting in dorm rooms and break rooms and overnight shifts, quietly building real skills while someone at home called their dreams unrealistic. I wanted them to have more than just motivation. Motivation is beautiful, but tuition is real. Laptops are real. Mentorship is real. A safe place to ask a stupid question without getting laughed at is real. Denise still calls sometimes. At first, every conversation drifted right back toward money, or Connor, or whether I was seeing anyone serious. I ended those calls quickly. Slowly, though, something shifted, not completely, because people rarely change overnight just out of shame, but she started asking one real question and then actually staying quiet long enough to hear the answer. "What did your team build this month? How many people work for you now? What does an insurance adjuster actually do all day?" The first time she apologized without tacking an excuse onto the end of it, I almost hung up the phone because I genuinely didn't know where to put that feeling. She said, "I was proud of the child who made me feel important, and I ignored the one who never asked me for anything. That wasn't your fault. It was mine." I didn't forgive her in that exact moment. Forgiveness isn't a button someone else gets to press just because they finally found the right sentence. But I heard her, and that was more than I'd ever gotten from her the year before. Gary and I talk more these days. He doesn't try to rewrite the past, which helps more than he probably realizes. Sometimes he sends me pictures from his evening walks, and sometimes I send him photos from the office. We're building something small and honest, which beats something big and fake every time. Connor had the hardest road after that Thanksgiving. Without Denise quietly smoothing over every consequence, his debts became real. His missed deadlines became real. Brooke started asking questions he couldn't charm his way around anymore. For a while, he blamed me. Then he stopped asking anyone for money and took a steady job with a property management company where nobody cared that his mother used to think he was destined for greatness. Last month, he texted me one line, "I think she hurt both of us just in different ways." I sat with that for a while before typing back, "I think you're right. That doesn't make us close. It makes us honest. And honest is at least a place to start." People ask me sometimes if turning down $28 million was the ultimate revenge. It wasn't. The real victory was never needing that money badly enough to betray the people who'd actually helped me build the company. The real victory was watching Denise finally understand that the daughter she'd treated like background noise had quietly become the one person in the family nobody could control anymore. The real victory wasn't yelling or begging or proving myself at that table. It was simply setting a boundary and keeping it even after the tears started. If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, hear me on this. Being overlooked can make you hungry, but that hunger needs somewhere to go. Don't let it turn you bitter. Let it make you disciplined instead. Let it push you toward real skills, toward knowledge nobody can take back from you. Ask questions. Find people who'll actually answer them. Save what you can. Build slowly if that's what it takes. The people who once overlooked you might come circling back the moment your success becomes visible. But you don't owe them the version of you they suddenly find convenient. You can love people from a careful distance. You can accept an apology without handing back full access. You can be kind without ever again being available for exploitation. That isn't bitterness. That's just wisdom, finally earned the hard way. My mother ignored me for 11 years, then suddenly remembered I existed the moment she found out I was worth something. But by the time she finally saw me, I'd already learned how to see myself. That part, she never gets to take credit for. That part, no offer on earth could have bought. So if you're sitting somewhere tonight feeling like the forgotten one, the overlooked sibling, the quiet kid nobody expected much from, hear this clearly. Their attention was never the finish line. Their approval was never the prize. Build a life that teaches you your own worth before anyone else gets the chance to put a price tag on it. And if the people who once looked through you finally turn their heads your way, let them look. You don't owe them the keys just because they finally showed up. Tell me in the comments, if you were sitting at that Thanksgiving table, would you have stayed quiet through dessert, or would you have walked out the second she said, "Little computer thing"?